Hi, this is Tracy Hales Vass with Right on Four Corners on KSJE 90.9 FM. Today I'm talking with Mary Oertel-Kirschner about her winning book, Death of the Head, and also her book, Never Too Old. Hi, Mary.
Hi.
Well, I have to say I really loved both your books, Never Too Old and Death of the Head, with the famous sleuth Blanche Harriman.
Good.
I really liked Blanche.
She seems to appeal to a lot of people of my demographic. I'm in my 70s.
There you go. I'm almost there, so I liked her a lot.
Good.
The novel, they call it a cozy mystery, won the New Mexico Prize, Fiction Prize for Cozy Mystery.
That's right. It's the New Mexico-Arizona Book Award given each year.
Well, that's a great honor.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm very pleased.
Why don't we take just a minute to give our listeners a little synopsis of the prize-winning book, Death of the Head?
Well, it has to do with the sudden and unexpected death of the headmistress of an elite girls' school in Santa Fe. And my heroine, Blanche, is on the board of trustees at the school, which is called the Cather School, in memory of Willa Cather.
Mm-hmm.
And so she immediately becomes involved in the situation. And part of her responsibility is to help find a new head of school. And the school also happens to have a valuable art collection, and that plays into the plot. And Blanche finds herself involved in things that the Santa Fe police would prefer that she did not. They think she's taking unnecessary risks, but she pursues it.
She just can't sit still.
No, she can't.
So Blanche, we met Blanche in Never Too Old, and we met the retirement home in which she lives, which is a very exclusive place in Santa Fe.
That's right. It's a really upscale retirement community or compound, they like to say.
Mm-hmm.
And in the first book, Blanche had a very close friend named Margaret Forbes, who was 82 years old, even older than my heroine Blanche, who was 78. And Margaret Forbes was in very good shape. The two of them had been planning a trip to go skydiving in Cozumel, Mexico. Suddenly, Margaret Forbes turns up dead, and it's passed off very easily as a heart attack. But Blanche does not believe that. She knows that her friend never had any heart problems at all, and so she begins to investigate what really might have gone on.
That's right. And she sticks herself in all kinds of situations that she shouldn't.
She does, and she enlists the help of some other residents at this fancy retirement compound. Even a friend of hers who has had a stroke and is confined to a wheelchair, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with her mind, and she becomes a very important person in helping Blanche entrap the perpetrator.
Yes, she does. That's Helen. She's great.
Yeah, she's good. What I wanted to do really was play with a lot of common misconceptions about older people. They're often just sort of passed off as someone who is no longer very bright or concerned about things. They're
right.
Sort of ignored in many circumstances. And that's one of the things I wanted to play with, the fact that people underestimate older women.
That's right. And not these women.
Nope.
They're forces to be reckoned with.
I think they are.
Yes. And I love the way you describe the clothing.
Oh, good.
Yeah, Blanche is no underspoken as far as dressing person, or her hair. Yes.
That's a delicate way of putting it.
Yeah. I like it, though.
Good.
And then,
Good.
of course, foods are talked about in great detail, which is wonderful too.
Well, good. I appreciate that. I think that most women, maybe men don't always know this, but most women are concerned about their appearance.
Right.
And they try to dress sort of appropriately for the occasion.
Mm-hmm.
Blanche does that, but she dresses a little more flamboyantly than she ever would have dressed back in Birch, Minnesota, where she
That's
came from.
right. You notice her as you're walking down the streets of Santa Fe. And so
well, I
you're...
tried to put in local color, yes.
Yes. Are you in Santa Fe?
No, I'm in Albuquerque, but I have lived in Santa Fe. I was a newspaper reporter in Santa Fe many years ago.
Ah.
And it's just an hour from Albuquerque.
Right.
And I go there often to visit art galleries and whatnot.
You know it well, and you describe it well. If anybody's familiar with Santa Fe, they certainly can recognize the streets and the restaurants there. And the artwork that you talk about in Death of the Head is familiar too, and the artists are real artists, right?
Well, they are. It's a period of art, the mid-20th century, that I've always loved. And I always loved the group of artists called Los Cinco Pintores,
Mm-hmm.
who painted in Santa Fe in the 20s and 30s and 40s, and their art is still admired today very much. So I kind of wanted to play with that idea.
Yes, I liked reading about that and having the real art there.
That's right. I had to be careful. I did quite a bit of research because I didn't want to represent a real painting, but I made up the names of paintings and tried to describe them in the style of that particular painter.
Oh.
So that it would be believable to people, but I didn't want to get into legal trouble describing a real painting by its real name.
I was wondering about that, yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So, are you an art buff yourself then?
I am, and I'm also a painter.
Oh.
But I love art. I've always loved it, and I've been painting for the past 12, 15 years. I'm still consider myself an amateur, but I have learned a lot, and it has trained my eye to look even more closely at art by trying to learn how to paint myself.
And did you then paint the original for the covers of these books?
Well, I sketched them both out.
Mm-hmm.
I had very clear ideas as to what I wanted in terms of where the figure would be placed, the colors. On Death of the Head, I have the sleuth, Blanche,
Right.
examining a painting, and I actually did paint that painting
Oh.
to look like a piece from that period of art in Santa Fe.
Oh, well,
And
that's
she's examining it with a magnifying glass.
magnifying glass, right. Oh, well, isn't
But I
that...
did have an artist do the final artwork because I'm not really equipped to put it all together.
Well, they're lovely, yeah. And I like the one that's she's looking at. But you can tell through the writing that there's a knowledge of art there.
Uh-huh. Good. Thank you.
So, whatever gave you the idea of Blanche?
Well, that's an interesting question. It goes back a long time. Maybe 30, 40 years ago, my husband, who's from New York, was going down to Florida to visit his parents. They were New Yorkers, but they always spent a month or two in Florida during the winter. And we had a young child at the time. So he went down himself to visit. And when he came back, he said to me, I was talking with my mother and some of her friends, and she said to me, even though we're older, we still have the same thoughts and fantasies and ideas we had when we were younger. Now, my husband Dick was reporting this to me, and at the time I thought, oh, wow, that's really interesting. I was in my 30s at the time.
I understand.
Well, it sort of struck me that these older women still were the same inside. Well, that was the genesis of the idea, and years passed, and I began drafting my first book, Never Too Old.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a writing group, and, this is 20-some years ago. And then life intervened.
It does that.
Yes, it does that. We had a son who was playing a lot of sports, and I was taking him around, and I was working part-time. But some of the people in my writing group never forgot this character. And they would ask me periodically, whatever happened to Blanche? Get her out. So a couple of years ago, I pulled the old draft manuscript off the shelf. I had to update a lot of things. I had to update her age, for starters. At that time, I pictured an older woman being 68 years old.
I understand how that changes.
Now I'm in my 70s. I had to bump her up to 78.
Right.
So anyway, that's the genesis. Really the core of the idea was to present an older woman who still had all her marbles and who was bright and interested and is still interested in clothes and other people, even perhaps a little romance.
Mm-hmm.
And it took off from there.
Oh, that's great. And why did you choose cozy mystery as your genre?
Well, I enjoy a light touch.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not drawn to thrillers. They're too scary for me. I don't want to dwell in blood and guts and terrorism.
Right.
So it just kind of fell into place. With a little humor, the light touch appealed to me.
And it has that, but it's a very good story. And the characters are really good. Do you know some of these characters in real life?
No, I don't. I think maybe bits and pieces of the characters are people I have met or known. But they're all really fabricated with a little here and a little there.
Right. Well, would you like to read for our listeners a little bit from Death of the Head?
Oh, I'd be delighted to. Sure.
Great.
I think I'll just start with a couple pages from the very first chapter because that sets the scene.
Perfect.
So here we go. Death of the Head, Chapter 1. Spring in Santa Fe is a tenuous thing. The lilacs are already in bud when inevitably a late storm presses their branches to the ground with a heavy blanket of snow. One has to be prepared for just about anything in the course of a day's outing. Such were Blanche Harriman's thoughts as she studied the contents of her closet at La Mesa del Sol, Santa Fe's most elegant retirement address. She pursed her lips, concentrating. Something with a jacket, probably, but not too heavy. The black crepe would do, maybe the right thing considering the occasion, but it was a bit solemn for a board meeting. She'd save it for the funeral. Flipping through a dozen more hangers, she stopped at a pumpkin-colored coat dress with buttons made of water buffalo horn, a recent find at Ritzy Resale. It had the virtue of being loose like a coat, and the color would be good with her hair, a tussle of auburn leaning towards flame curls. She held it up and studied herself in the mirror. Not bad for 78. Not bad at all. She wished Mabel Gladowski could see her now. Thoughts of Mabel Gladowski popped into Blanche's mind at unexpected moments since moving from Birch, Minnesota, a couple of years earlier. Mabel had been founder and self-appointed chief of the Birch Area Hospital Auxiliary, as well as president of the Birch Book Circle. She'd been struck speechless, a rare occurrence, when Blanche told her she was moving to New Mexico. Mabel couldn't fathom so dramatic a bend in life's road, and Blanche enjoyed the look of disbelief that crossed Mabel's face when she made the announcement. Blanche had already encountered the big bend in the road when Arthur suffered his sudden and fatal heart attack one ordinary weekday on his way home from work. At first, she was in too much of a shock to think about anything but making it to the next day. But after a few months, she began to feel a strange restlessness. And then came the invitation from an old friend to visit Santa Fe. The rest, as they say, is history. La Mesa del Sol Retirement Village rests on a promontory on the edge of town, not far from the famous Santa Fe Opera. To the east, the Sangre de Cristo Mountains fill the eye like a reclining figure in a wide-angle lens. Feminine-looking offspring of the rugged Rockies to the north, they're washed in iridescent fuchsia light each day at sunset. Some have likened the color to the blood of Christ, hence the name Sangre de Cristo. Blanche's adult daughter, Mitzi, who lived in Phoenix, was likewise shocked to learn of her mother's plan to uproot herself from Minnesota, where she'd lived all her life. She flew over to Santa Fe to check out La Mesa del Sol, and after seeing it for herself, gave it her stamp of approval. 2, she was pleased to have her mother living just one state away, where she could keep a closer eye on her. Things progressed quickly once Blanche made her move. She'd been in Santa Fe just a couple of weeks, for example, when she saw a pair of red cowboy boots in a shop window, totally unlike anything she could have imagined wearing in Birch. She realized that no one, not even dear Arthur, bless his soul, was going to raise an eyebrow if she owned them. Eventually, she worked up to her hair, which had been a mousy sort of widow's gray when she arrived in Santa Fe. There was nothing mousy about it now.
That certainly is true. Very good. So you're showing not only how elder people can have a lot of spunk, but they can change. They can become more full people.
Well, I think that's true. I think there's a certain freedom in aging. You stop being so concerned about what people around you might think. You're kind of free to express yourself in the way that you wish.
Right. I love that. And I love the characters, like I said, at La Mesa, because that's what they're doing.
Yeah, I think so.
So, Mary, you said that you were a writer of a different sort previously.
Well, I was. I was a newspaper reporter back in the 60s and 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And then I worked for a number of private companies, sometimes doing publicity, sometimes technical writing. I worked in Washington, D.C. for a while as a technical writer for a consulting firm. And throughout, I've written poetry.
Oh.
And in fact, my next project, I think, is to compile a little book of some of my poems.
Oh, great. Will we see Blanche again?
Well, maybe. I've been asked that, of course.
I'm sure.
I've been rolling around some ideas in my mind, but I haven't actually begun on another book yet.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would love to see that.
Thank you.
You also
That's
mentioned,
encouraging.
Yeah, these are well done. And you also mentioned that you work with a writers group.
Yes. Years ago, when I was first playing around with the idea of writing a novel with an older woman heroine, I was in a writers group, a group of 4 or 5 women here in Albuquerque who met regularly to exchange what we'd drafted and get input from the others and encourage each other. That was very, very helpful at the time, and that particular group doesn't really exist anymore, but I'm still friends with those women, and there are some of the women who would bug me every once in a while saying, whatever happened to Blanche? Get her back out there.
They remembered her.
Yes, they did.
When you finally decided to bring forth Blanche and write her books, how did you? What was your writing process?
Well, I'm not particularly disciplined. I would go in stages of working feverishly, and then I would be distracted by things and be off of it, and then come back to it. But as I began getting a full manuscript together in each case of these two books. Of course, it got more compelling to finish it. And then I would print it all out, and then I would start editing it, cleaning it up, being able to see the whole story together in my hands helped me pare down, eliminate, make sure things were consistent. I introduced quite a few characters, so I had to pace it in a certain way that I wouldn't reveal too much too soon, but nor did I want a complete red herring thing to fly into the end of the book, which wasn't believable.
Right.
I was very concerned about sort of building up the possibilities.
I think that's something that is particular to mysteries, is writing it so that the clues are there, but not too much.
I think that's right, yes.
And you've done well with that in both of these books. Now, once you wrote Never Too Old, you got right on to Death of the Head. Is that right?
Pretty soon, because I was surprised by the positive reaction to Death of the Head. I mean, it's my first book. I'm an older woman. It was all new to me getting a book out there, but I got a lot of positive response from it. It was a finalist in the Arizona-New Mexico book competition in 2017, and people seemed to really like it, and I was asked repeatedly, when is the next one coming?
Great.
So that was very encouraging to get right on another one.
Good. So you plan on putting together poetry next. I like that idea, too.
Yes.
Do you have a collection of poetry you've been working on over the years?
Well, I do, really. I do. It's a little scattered here and there. Some of the work will be compiling it, getting it in order. I've had a number of poems published in small regional publications, and I have stacks of poems. So
Great.
It's a matter of going through my files, selecting enough that would compile a little chapbook, but not so many as to be overwhelming. But that is what I wish to do.
Great. Well, I look forward to that.
Well, thank you.
I have quite a few authors that were in former occupations, technical writers and nonfiction writers. Did that help or hinder you when you started writing fiction?
Oh, I think it was helpful. Just the idea that writing did not frighten me. Many people seem to be nervous as soon as they're asked to write something, and I didn't carry that because all my life my work has been some kind of writing, one kind or another. So I found it kind of freeing, actually, because I didn't have to stick too hard to actual facts. I could make it up.
Right.
And that was fun.
I think also some of my authors have said that the technical writing aspects have taught a little bit of discipline with writing also. Well,
that's true. But as I said before, I have not had a strict writing schedule. I'm afraid I didn't get up every morning and go directly to my keyboard.
That's okay.
But I got it done.
Exactly.
Some late nights, and I got it done.
Exactly. Very good. So do you still meet with a writer's group? You said the one you were with kind of dissipated?
It did. It has. People have gone different ways. So we don't meet regularly, but we still talk writing when we do meet for lunch.
Great. I think that's important to keep track of other writers and what's happening.
Yes, it's true, and it was very, very supportive and encouraging to me. I recommend it highly because writing is a rather solitary occupation, and you really need some input and encouragement from others who are sort of in the same bag as you.
I agree with that. So were you a person who read a lot of mysteries?
Not necessarily. I've read a lot of fiction, and I'm always reading fiction. I'm in a book group, and I love that. I have read some mysteries. I like humor. I can't say that I've read a lot of mysteries or cozies.
It seems to me that there's like a model that you kind of have to work with. Did you find that to be true?
To some extent, yes. In both of my books, I mapped out the progression of events.
Oh.
I would write a couple lines for each chapter so that I could move the story forward, so that I could introduce some red herrings at particular times earlier in the book, of course, introduce characters, and keep driving towards the conclusion. So I guess that's what a mystery does, really.
Right.
You introduce a lot of possibilities,
right.
and then it gets funneled down at the end. So to that extent, there's a formula to it, sure.
Did you know who the killer was when you started writing?
Oh, yes. Yes. I worked out things in my mind, and then as I said, I kind of typed up a chapter summary, chapter by chapter. Although as I started writing, those chapters got placed in different places.
Ah, interesting.
Because it wasn't always synchronized in the right way. There had to be a certain chronology to the story. And as I began filling it out, sometimes I had to shift things around. But I did know the basic story. I did know the villain. I had ideas about some of the suspects, and I had that pretty well planned out. I know that Tony Hillerman, who's a favorite writer, used to say that he didn't work that way.
Oh.
The story and the characters came alive for him, and he didn't know how it was all going to end.
Interesting.
Well, I just had to do that. I had to have a pretty clear idea in my mind of where I was going when I started.
I understand that. It seems to me that would be... Well, we're not all Tony Hillerman, I guess.
Right.
And so where can listeners find your books?
Well, they're all available on Amazon, and they're both e-versions and print versions. And here in Albuquerque and in Santa Fe, local bookstores carry them.
Okay. Well, that is Never Too Old and the prize winner, Death of the Head. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me about these books, Mary.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And that was Mary Oertel-Kirschner talking about her cozy mysteries, Never Too Old, and the award-winning Death of the Head. This is Tracy Hales-Vass with Right on Four Corners on KSJE 90.9 FM in Farmington, New Mexico.